Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Today's video is unexpected because my plans for today have been shot to pieces due to an illness. Still, best laid plans. So I'm going to do a couple of things. We're starting off quite clean and tidy, but it's going to get messier and messier in possibly more senses than one. I had an idea put to me that quite honestly I hadn't thought of. As you know, I've got a lot of mounted orchids, and to one degree or another they have some sphagnum moss, which starts off clean and sterile, but it does go green over time. Now I've always put that greenness down to algae, because obviously this is inert sphagnum. It has no life in it. It should never live. So if it starts growing, it's zombie moss, as I've heard it called before. But somebody put it to me that sphagnum moss can break down and turn acidic, which quite honestly I hadn't thought of. And when I was going over some of my plants that didn't seem to be doing so good, and I was thinking bad things, you know, the F word, and I still may have to go down that road. But the thought of moss turning acidic and messing the roots up hadn't occurred to me. So I'm going to start with a little experiment. This is not science. Well, it is, I suppose. But I've got one here, which I showed the other day. This is my, what is it again? Sophronitis cochineal, and it's the variety Japan. I think that's now called Cattleya. Boring. But nonetheless, although it's pushing out some new growths and it seems to be a happy plant, it hasn't got a happy root system. Now, there could be a nasty reason for that, but then why would the new growths be good? If the bad F word was involved, why would it be still putting out good new growths? So the suspect problem is in the roots, and maybe it's the moss. That's been mounted a long time. I've had that plant a long time. I'll put a pop-up. I'll have to go and look it up while this experiment's going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a flipping good soak for a while and see what happens to the water. So first of all, let's benchmark the water. This isn't my RO water, it's too precious. So this is just filtered water. This is actually the filter jug minus its apparatus, because it's the only thing I've got that's deep enough to do this. Now I know what's going to happen when I put that in the water. It's going to try and float because it's on cork. So I'm going to have to weigh it down. That's my theory. But first we need to know our start point. And we have a TDS reading of, come on, settle down, let's give it a good slosh. Well, it says 194. Let's remember that. So we're starting with a TDS reading of 194, but more importantly we are starting with a pH of, when it decides to settle down. I will need to give this little meter time. It always reads slightly high and then drops down. So 6.6, now we're down to 6.5. I think it's going to settle there. Now, although these little pH meters are not incredibly accurate devices, 6.4 now, so it has dropped slightly. For this experiment, it doesn't matter how accurate it is. All I'm interested in is the change. And in theory, if this theory rings true, we should get quite a dramatic drop in pH from the so-called acidic moss. I mean, the cork is pretty inert. I don't think that's going to have an effect. So we're starting with that TDS reading and a pH of 6.4. Now all I'm going to do is dunk this unceremoniously in that water and stick that on the top to make sure it stays there without bending that new growth. Now I know that's not an ideal thing to do to a plant, but it will dry off, yeah? And depending on the results of this, it may be coming off the mount anyway and having a good clean up, and I'll do a quick check for the nasty stuff while I'm there, while I have the opportunity, so that I can rule it out. But it's going to get remounted anyway. That I have made my mind up. Now there's a shed load of plants going to come out here and take part in this video. I did a video on those that get to stay and those that get to go. Well, certain things have speeded up that process. I do have a show coming up, and I'd just forgotten the way that January is floating past. That show's not too far away now, and the chances are I might see some nice plants that I want to buy from at least one of the vendors that's going to be there. So the space is now required. Okay, so I'm just going to shut down now, and I'm going to give that time, probably about an hour, and I will make good use of that time by watering my indoor Phalaenopsis, which were due to be done tomorrow, but I'm going to do them today now because I've suddenly got spare time. So I'll be back. Okay, I thought I'd just slot this in. I don't know what the collective noun for Phalaenopsis is, but a lot of them. Now you can see there's a multitude of red tags in amongst there. All red tags mean not my plant, they're my daughter's. Now obviously these plants she can grow reasonably well, and there are some nice ones in here. You can see a few spikes dotted around here and there, and those two come out and get watered in the same vein because they're kept indoors at the moment. But just to show you, you must be able to see that there's even bugs on the spikes. Yeah, so just because they're indoors does not mean they haven't got bugs. So yet again, absolutely everything has been sprayed. Now I've only used the ready mixed stuff because it was ready mixed and readily to hand. But yeah, absolutely everything's been sprayed, which is really why it's out here, because it's just being allowed to dry. And the time now is it's coming up to about 11:30. Now these plants have just had a thorough soaking both in the pot, and the plants have been thoroughly sprayed. Now everybody needs to worry about crown rot with Phalaenopsis and getting liquid into those crowns, but the problem isn't the fact that the liquid went in there, it's how long it stays there. And perhaps if I remember, I'll show you these in about an hour's time. The plants will be dry, and so will their crowns. That water's only going to be there a short period of time. And quite honestly, it's not water, you know, it's a bug killer. Given that it kills things, you know, if there's any mouldy spores or anything like that lying around, the chances are I've taken them out at the same time, even though that's not specifically designed for that. Okay, just a quick look. So I'm not going over each individual plant, but something came up on Facebook about looking after phals, and your general hybrid, you know, complex hybrid phals that have been bred in over years and years and years are incredibly tolerant plants. And in my book, they ought to be dry or as near dry before you water them again. That's how I would look after them. But there was a discussion about when you get into the species Phalaenopsis, a lot of them don't want to go dry. They need to stay moist. And I said, well, I haven't got any species phal unless Sideria japonica counts. Well, apparently that's been renamed as a Phalaenopsis. I've got a species phal. Just the one. But, you know, it's a name change thing. But, you know, it just tickled me that I never thought I'd go down that road. They're not of great interest to me. But, yeah, I've got one. Just a little point. Hi, I'm back. That's all my Phalaenopsis watered. I've stuck a little insert in this even though Phalaenopsis weren't on the plan, but I thought as they're all out, I thought I'd film. I've thought of a collective name for Phalaenopsis, a sea of Phalaenopsis, because that's what it looks like. Anyway, I thought I'd slot that in. Right, let's see how we're doing here. Now this is an experiment, so I haven't got a clue what's going to happen. Let's have a slosh round, shall we? No breaking any new growths off with any luck. There we go. Allow that to drip. What I'm after is the water that comes off of that moss. Now obviously to get the best reading I should allow every little drip to come off, but I might be here a while if I wait for that, so that really is just going to have to do. That plant's wet. Right, let's see what we've got. Let's have a stir with something. Spoon. Make sure the water's well mixed. There we go. Well, it's changed colour, that I can see. We now have a brownish tinge. But more importantly, what readings have we got? Now, in theory, the TDS value shouldn't have changed much. If it has, what's happened? Well, what will have happened if the TDS level has changed and gone up significantly is I've just washed out some undissolved salts from the root mass, possibly on the mount and from that moss, which means I'm holding fertiliser that I would rather not do. I mean, I do flush, so in theory this, I've got to try and remember what the hell it was. Okay, observation number 1. The TDS on this was 194. It's now 235. That's a significant increase. That would be the difference in my reading between some of my lower feed orchids, I mean the difference, not the actual value, and my higher feed orchids. So quite a lot has come out into that water. Now that was unexpected. Again, perhaps we need to flush a bit more often. Maybe that's a consequence of that organic fertiliser. Unknown, but we'll deal with the problem. This is the one that the experiment was really for, is pH value. Now, this is going to have to go down as a misread. We're now reading 6.4. Now, I was expecting that to drop, and it hasn't. But what we have done is washed something else into that water. So that's not a level playing field anymore, because I don't know, well I do, but I don't know exactly what came out of that moss, out of the bark and out of the root system. But the pH has remained the same, which implies that the moss is not acidic. But as I've said, this is an experiment and this isn't strictly controlled anymore, because a lot of salts and various things unknown have been washed away from the plant and the bark into the water. So I'm not starting with the same TDS reading as I had before. And as soon as you start adding things into water and affecting the TDS value, you can alter your reading on the pH. Yeah, but nonetheless, I don't really think the moss is breaking down. Okay, so we might be able to sort of exclude that possibility. But nonetheless, irrespective of those readings and irrespective of anything else, the plant is not doing well. New growths, yes. New roots, no. So it's still coming off of its mount. Yeah, and it's going to get a good clean up and get the old H2O2 out, hydrogen peroxide. Give the whole thing a flipping good clean, re-sterilise the mount, and I'm probably just going to remount it with some new moss, because having taken it all off, it would be silly to leave the moss on there, wouldn't it? So I'm going to do that anyway, but not the results I was expecting, but not really that scientific either. So okay, I'll leave that bit for the video for now, and I'll move on to some other bits and pieces as I go along. Okay, I've cleaned him up a bit. Not a lot left, is there? Still, that's life. Quite honestly, I've just thought back when I first mounted this, it didn't have a very good root system in the first place. Then it did well, and then it went downhill. So the next thing is the sacrificial lamb. Now, I've found a leafless pseudobulb right near the edge that I can get at. Now I'm going to use these tiny little scissors here which of course I've sterilised, simply because I've found a problem with my shears, the ones I use all the time. I don't know whether you can actually see that, but when closed, they don't close anymore. The tip doesn't come together, which means when I want to get in a very fine confined space, they're not doing their job properly anymore. So they'll probably have to get replaced, because that's my bonsai pruning shears in its strictest sense, and I need those little ends to snip when I want them to. So I'm just going to use the nail scissors. I'm just going to cut that leafless bulb off. Oops, well, these are not as sharp as they should be. Right. Whoops, you probably can't see that. That's clean as a whistle. It's bright green. There is no sign of any of the dreaded purple. Now, I still don't recommend you go hacking all your plants to pieces. You can see what I've just done. I'm remounting a plant to try and invigorate it. Yeah? It has a lot of bulbs and a lot of new growths, but no new roots. That was my problem. But what it doesn't have, oh, this camera just won't get in close enough, but I'll see what I can do. But you can see where I've just cut there, it's green. So even though that was an old pseudo bulb and potentially could have been quite dry, what it isn't is purple. So I'm still nil, yeah? Every investigation I've had thinking I may have Fusarium has come up zero, apart from that one Cymbidium that came from somewhere else, and I'm trying to keep it for somebody else. And yes, that had it, absolutely no doubt, but you know, that's a potential to get into my collection. So it's been isolated. It's nowhere near my collection. Never will be. It also got sprayed with the systemic fungicide. Come to think of it, needs doing again. So you know, I'm trying to rescue a plant that's definitely got Fusarium, but this one hasn't. So we can now go ahead and deal with it. I just need to sort myself out here, so I'll shut down and come back again when I'm ready to actually mount it up again. Okay, let's go then. As I said in a previous video, every time I get near a plant, you know, for any reason really, and just for a bit of background stuff, I would naturally just have another quick look as how it's supposed to be kept. And one thing I did forget, where's me cut? Yeah, it is a bare cut, and as a consequence it's just going to get a little dab of cinnamon on that cut, just to dry that area off. That's all it's for. You'll probably get away with not doing that. Hands wash. Why is it every time I touch cinnamon I want apple pie? Think it through. Anyway, so I had a look at this little plant. Now this is, I think it's in fact been renamed Cattleya. So in your general terms, what do Cattleyas like? Highlight? Yep. They like it pretty warm, they don't like it boiling hot, and they don't like it cold. Our survey said, this one's different. Yeah? Also, Cattleyas, wet-dry cycle. Extremely important. You must let your Cattleya roots dry right off. They're prone to rotting. Our survey said, this one's different. It's been being looked after a little wrong. It goes down to me. Right, why was it a bit wrong? Let's just plonk that down. I've decided that's how it's going to go, mainly because there's a new growth at the back that I don't want to squash. That was heading into the bark, that new growth, so by moving it I've saved it. That gives me two new growths at the bottom, quite well advanced, this one and this one. Yeah, they're pushing out quite nicely. But up the top are two new ones. Yeah, that one hasn't opened its leaf yet, and that new one down there, and I want them to go upwards. So this is going to get put in a different position this time. I'm going to mount it like that, so that that new growth at the top can get away without just burying its head in the sand, basically. So anyway, this little plant comes from montane forests. It comes from what I would class as a medium altitude, so it doesn't get hot, number one. montane forest. Pretty damp, pretty wet most of the time. So the care for this one apparently is that it needs to stay moist and it should be fed and watered year round. Yeah? And yes, bright light, but not as warm as you would expect a normal cattleya to be. So this one's going to find a new home in the grow room, away from the roof, but nice and close to the glass. That will reduce its temperature down, but still keep the light level up. Yeah? So I think this poor little thing, we had a heat wave last year, and that may have been part of its downfall. It may have just got stewed because it was up so high. You know, the heat collects in the roof and all that. I know I've got circulating fans, but they can only do so much. Yeah, so this one gets looked after slightly differently to a normal cattleya. Yeah, likes to be on the cooler side, can be found growing on rocks, but it grows on moss-covered trees mainly. Where it's found in its native habitat, that's where it's found most of the time. Okay, so by putting it on a mount with a little bit of moss, in theory it should feel at home. Now it says moss-covered trees, but I don't want a lot of moss. You know, I haven't really got a root system yet. Let's let it get a root system and then worry about it. So literally that's all it's going to get, just a smidgen. Yeah, that'll be enough. And the fact that it likes to stay moist, that's down to me to water it, not keep it in soggy moss. So that's what I'm deciding to do. Okay, right, that's going to go on there. And blow me, somebody's just come to the door. I will be back. Interruptions. Okay, let's get going again. I've also had the magic warning beep on the camera that says the battery's getting low, so if it all goes blank, that's what's just happened. Anyway, let's get a good length of our fishing line out. I'm probably only going to have to go around a few times, but it's a wide piece of bark and I don't like running out halfway. So we'll have a good length of that. If I waste a bit, it's not the end of the world. It's a huge reel. Okay, so I've got a moss base. Now, a little thought having looked up this plant's care. It grows on moss-covered trees. So it obviously likes its roots to get into something rather than just be on a bare tree trunk like some of them are. So there's a couple of good roots. I am just going to put a little bit of moss over the top of those and hopefully it won't fall off. Dry hands. Now where did we find on the floor as usual? Tangled mess. Okay, and we'll see what we can do. All I want to do is attach this so that it's reasonably firm, and I'm hoping that it will just rejuvenate partly through the new moss and again partly by getting some care that's more appropriate to it, you know. That would have been good if I'd looked that up a while ago, wouldn't it? Instead of waiting for it to get in a mess. Still, what's done is done. Do you know, I've got a complete mind blank now. There we go. I'd forgotten how to tie a slip knot. Oh, I'm not having a good day today. Well, I am, but it's a busy day and I've got lots of things on the go at the same time, which is not always good. Right, let's find a suitable place to put the first loop round without knocking everything flying like that. This is where the third hand comes in handy, which we haven't got. Come on, evolution, we need a third hand. Get at it. Come back in 10 million years or something. We'll see what happens. So there we go, that's the first loop. We're not garrotting the plant, we're gently holding it with any luck. That's all it needs. It doesn't need to be garrotted. Now that's a fiddly one, so I'm going to have to go right up behind that leaf and then come back down again and up around the back of that leaf and come back down again. What I do is I look for a point where the tie can go round and get at the rhizomes, not interrupting anything to do with the way the plant wants to be. Okay, I'm probably only going to put one more round there, just around that top bit. There we go, and before I tie off, yep, that's good and firm. That's all it needs. It only needs to be held in place. As I say, we're not trying to garrot the poor little devil, we're just trying to hold it in place. Round the back, suitable place to tie off. Come on, wet hands again. You see what I mean? You get wet hands with this stuff and everything sticks. There we go, that should stay there. And what don't we forget when we mount a plant or pot a plant? The tag. I don't think I'd ever forget what that one is, but you know, it's still nice to have your tag. So we'll attach that. These tags have a suitable hole in them, so while I've got some loose ends, I can just poke an end through there and just stick another knot in place, then it can't fall off. You can just waggle around the back of the mount, which is all it needs to do. It just needs to be there, really. There we go, tidy up the ends, job done. Okay, all I need to do now is go away and find a better place for him to be. Now there's some logic here, yeah? We have a new growth here and a new growth here. Now that new growth is actually touching the moss. I've done that deliberately. I could have actually lifted that, but basically if any new roots are going to come out of this plant, they will be where the new growths are. So those couple of new growths at the top, if they're going to push roots out, they'll go straight into the moss. And I've just actually noticed there's another new growth right in the middle there. If he's going to push roots out, they'll have to find their own way home. But yeah, I mean, that's it. It's nice and secure, doesn't wobble around. It's got some moss to get into, which on this plant, initially I was going to bare root this. I was actually just going to put it back on the bark thinking the moss was the problem. Well, it still may have been the problem, but I think the problem was just that this was being kept far too warm during last summer. Set it back, and it's hopefully now going to be in a process of recovery. I will now keep it cooler. Still needs the bright light, but I can cool it down a bit, find him a new home. Okay, so that's that one done. We've had a read about what this plant needs, and I'll adjust my culture accordingly. And we'll see how we get on. Updates will follow. Okay, I'll leave that bit then.